Imagine for a moment the terrifying reality of walking upon this earth, eating, drinking, and laughing, all while knowing that your ticket to the hellfire has already been printed, sealed, and delivered by the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Imagine being a man so arrogant, so consumed by hatred, that God Himself named a chapter of the Holy Quran after you, not to honor you, but to condemn you for all eternity. This is not a fable. This is not a myth. This is the chilling true story of a man who thought his wealth and lineage made him untouchable, and a woman who thought her beauty and status gave her the right to humiliate the best of mankind. This is the story of the only enemy of Islam to be mentioned by name in the Quran. This is the story of the burning flame, Abu Lahab, and his carrier of firewood. To the modern world, and perhaps even to many of us living in the comfort of our homes today, the verses of the Quran are often recited with a rhythmic beauty that soothes the soul. We teach our children the short chapters. We listen to them recite Surah Al-Lahab with innocent voices. But do we pause to feel the heat rising from those words? Do we understand that these verses were not merely poetic lines, but a divine decree of war against specific individuals who walked the streets of Mecca? When we recite, "May the hands of Abu Lahab be ruined," we are echoing a judgment that shook the Arabian Peninsula. But why? What could a man possibly do to deserve such a specific, eternal public humiliation? What did his wife do to ensure that she too would be remembered only as fuel for the fire? The answer lies in a tale of betrayal, family pride, and a hatred so deep it blinded the eyes of the heart. Let us transport ourselves back to the arid, sun-drenched valley of Mecca. It was a time of tribal loyalty, where blood was thicker than water, and the honor of one's clan was worth dying for. In this society, an uncle was like a father. He was a guardian, a protector, a pillar of support. Muhammad, peace be upon him, had lost his own father before he even took his first breath. He was an orphan who needed the shield of his family. And among his uncles was a man named Abdul Uzza, known to us as Abu Lahab. He was a man of striking appearance, his face often flushed and glowing, which earned him the nickname Father of the Flame. He was powerful, wealthy, and commanded the respect of the Quraysh elite. He should have been the first to stand by his nephew. He should have been the wall between the prophet and his enemies. But destiny and his own blackened heart had written a different script. The story truly begins on a morning that started like any other in the bustling city of Mecca. The sun was casting its golden rays over the desert sands. The merchants were setting up their stalls. The air was filled with the sounds of camels and the chatter of trade. People were waking up in their homes, stretching, unaware that history was about to shift on its axis. Suddenly, a voice pierced the morning calm. It was not the call of a market crier, nor the chant of a poet. It was a sound of urgent alarm. A figure stood atop Mount Safa, the high ground from which urgent news was delivered to the tribes. It was Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. He stood tall against the horizon, his voice echoing through the valley with the cry of Ya Sabaha. In the customs of the Arabs, this cry was not used lightly. It was the red alert of its time. It meant an army was approaching. It meant disaster was imminent. It meant drop everything and run. The reaction was immediate. Men abandoned their breakfasts. Shopkeepers left their goods unattended. Mothers grabbed their children. The curiosity and fear were palpable. "Who is calling?" they asked. "It is Muhammad," came the reply, and that name meant something. For 40 years, they had known him only as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He had never lied, he had never cheated. If he was raising the alarm, the danger must be real. Crowds began to swarm towards the base of the mountain. The clans of Quraysh, Banu Hashim, Banu Abd Manaf, Banu Zuhra, all gathered, looking up at the man they trusted implicitly. Even those who could not come sent representatives to hear the news. The silence that fell over the crowd was heavy with anticipation. They expected to hear of a raiding party or a natural disaster. The prophet, peace be upon him, looked down at his people, his neighbors, his friends, his own flesh and blood. He asked them a simple, logical question to establish the foundation of truth. He called out, "Tell me, if I were to inform you that there is an army of cavalry in the valley behind this hill, ready to attack you, would you believe me?" The response was a thunderous, unified yes. They shouted back, "We have never found you telling a lie. We have experienced nothing but truthfulness from you." In that moment, they testified to his character. They handed him the credibility he needed. But the prophet was not warning them of an earthly army that could kill the body. He was warning them of a danger that could destroy the soul. He took a deep breath and delivered the message that would shatter their world. "Then know," he declared, "that I am a warner to you before the coming of a severe punishment. Save yourselves from the fire, for I possess no power to be of benefit to you, nor to protect you from Allah." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The air, which had been thick with concern for a physical enemy, now cracked with confusion and offense. He was telling them to abandon the idols of their forefathers. He was telling them that their lineage, their wealth, and their tribal status meant nothing before the one true God. The silence of the crowd was not one of respect anymore. It was the silence of shock. And then it was broken, not by a stranger, not by a distant enemy, but the man who stood in the front row, the man who was his father's brother, Abu Lahab. His face turned a deep red, angry, living up to his nickname. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury and arrogance. He didn't just disagree, he sought to humiliate. He shouted in front of the entire assembly, "Perish you! May ruin be upon you for the rest of the day! Is this why you gathered us here?" He dusted his hands off as if the message was filth, turning his back on the messenger of God. He spat out his curse, "Tabban laka," may you perish. It was a public rejection, a slap in the face of the prophet's honor. The crowd, taking their cue from the wealthy chieftain, began to disperse, muttering, laughing, and mocking. They left the prophet standing alone on the mountain, his heart heavy, his warning rejected. Abu Lahab walked away feeling triumphant. He thought he had crushed this new movement before it could even begin. He thought his words had power. But he forgot that there is a power above all powers. He forgot that when you attack the beloved of the Creator, you invite a war you cannot win. The heavens were not silent. The response did not come from the prophet's lips. It came from beyond the seven heavens. Gabriel descended, not with a sword, but with words, words that would outlast the stones of Mecca itself. Perished are the two hands of Abu Lahab, and perished is he. This was the revelation of Surah Al-Lahab. It was a mirror held up to the curse Abu Lahab had hurled. He said, "Taban laka" to the prophet, so Allah replied with Taban to Abu Lahab. The Quran declared that his hands, the symbols of his power, his action, and his ability to harm, were ruined. It declared that his vast wealth, which he was so proud of, and his children, whom he considered his legacy, would avail him nothing. He will burn in a fire of blazing flame. Imagine the terrifying nature of this prophecy. Abu Lahab lived for another decade after these verses were revealed. All he had to do to prove the Quran wrong was to convert to Islam, even hypocritically. He could have stood up and said, "Look, I believe. Your book says I will burn, But here I am, a Muslim. He could have destroyed the credibility of the entire religion with one lie, but he couldn't. He didn't. Allah knew his heart was sealed. The prophecy stood firm, testament to the divine origin of the book. But Abu Lahab was not alone in his campaign of hatred. Beside him stood a partner in crime, a woman who matched him in malice step for step. Arwa bint Harb, known as Jamil. She was the sister of Abu Sufyan, a woman of high nobility and immense beauty. She walked with the grace of royalty, wearing expensive jewelry and fine clothes, but inside she was rotting with envy and spite. When she heard what the Prophet was preaching, her hatred knew no bounds. She became the primary cheerleader of the persecution. The Quran describes her in a way that strips away all her worldly glamour. And his wife, the carrier of firewood. Some scholars say this refers to the literal bundles of thorny branches she would carry. In the dead of night, while the city slept, this noblewoman would degrade herself, creeping through the shadows like a common criminal. She would gather sharp, poisonous thorns and scatter them on the path where she knew the Prophet would walk to pray. She wanted to see him bleed. She wanted to hear him cry out in pain. She, who wore necklaces of gold, had a soul that carried only the wood for the fire of hatred. But her cruelty went beyond physical harm. She waged psychological warfare. She was a poetess, and she used her talent to twist the Prophet's name. Instead of Muhammad, the praised one, she called him Mudammam, the condemned one. She would walk through the markets, singing verses of slander, poisoning the ears of the people. And then she struck at the heart of the Prophet's home. Two of the Prophet's daughters, Ruqayya and Kulthum, were married to the sons of Abu Lahab. This was before the prohibition of marrying non-believers. When the message of Islam began to spread, Jamil and Abu Lahab commanded their sons, "Divorce them. We will not have the daughters of that magician in our house." They used the heartbreak of divorce as a weapon, trying to crush the Prophet with the sorrow of his children. They thought they were shaming him, but in reality, God was liberating those noble daughters from a house of evil. The Quran promises a specific punishment for Jamil. Around her neck is a rope of twisted fiber. In this life, she took immense pride in a magnificent necklace she wore, swearing by the idols that she would sell it to spend the money on opposing Muhammad, peace be upon him. Allah answered her pride with humiliation. The gold she cherished would be replaced by a rope of palm fiber in hell, tightening around her neck, choking her for eternity, just as she tried to choke the message of truth. The years passed and the persecution continued, but the wheels of divine justice turned slowly, yet exceedingly fine. The Battle of Badr came, a decisive victory for the Muslims. Abu Lahab did not attend the battle himself. He sent someone in his place, fearing for his life. When the news of the Quraysh's defeat reached Mecca, it broke him. He sat by the Kaaba, listening in disbelief as the messenger described how the weak Muslims had decimated the nobility of Mecca. He was struck with grief and rage. But his end was not a warrior's death. It was not a death of dignity. Shortly after Badr, a plague struck him, a disease called al-adasa, similar to smallpox, that causes the body to break out in foul-smelling, pus-filled boils. The man who boasted of his hands and his power became a source of contagion. His own family, the sons he was so proud of, abandoned him. They were terrified of catching the disease. He lay in his house dying alone, screaming in pain, with no one to bring him water or comfort. The father of the flame was burning with fever in this world before he even reached the next. When he finally died, his body began to decompose rapidly. The stench was so overpowering that the neighbors complained. His sons, still afraid to touch him, did not wash him or wrap him in a shroud. They did not carry him in a funeral procession. Instead, they hired slaves to drag his body out of the house. From a distance, they threw water on him and then pushed his corpse into a pit outside Mecca. They didn't even bury him properly. They just threw stones over the body until it was covered, treating him like a dead animal. This was the end of the man who mocked the messenger of God. This was the end of the man who thought his wealth made him immortal. His money could not buy him a cure. His lineage could not buy him a decent burial. His arrogance was buried under a pile of rocks, while the name of the man he hated, Muhammad, was being raised to the heavens, echoed in the Adhan 5 times a day in every corner of the globe. The story of Abu Lahab and Jamil is not just ancient history. It is a terrifying mirror for all of us. It forces us to ask ourselves, whose fire are we fueling? In our lives today, are we carrying firewood? When we spread gossip, when we slander others, when we use our influence to harm the innocent, are we walking in the footsteps of Jamil? When we let our pride and arrogance blind us to the truth, are we echoing the mindset of Abu Lahab? The Quran preserves this story to show us that proximity to righteousness is not enough. Abu Lahab was the Prophet's own uncle, yet he is in the deepest pits of hell. Salvation is not about who your father is or how much money you have in the bank. It is about the state of your heart and your submission to the truth. We must guard our tongues and our actions. We must ensure that we are builders of peace, not carriers of thorns. As we reflect on these verses, let them not just be sounds we make during prayer. Let them be a warning that shakes us awake. The legacy of Abu Lahab is of loss and ruin. The legacy of Muhammad, peace be upon him, is one of light and mercy. The choice of which legacy to follow is ours every single day. Thank you for joining us through this powerful reminder from our history. Stories like these are meant to polish the heart and guide the soul. If you found benefit in this video, if it made you reflect on your own life, then please help us share this light with others. Join our community by subscribing to Islamic Light Stories TV. Together, let us keep the true stories of our faith alive, spreading wisdom and understanding to every corner of the world.